Hey everyone. Thanks for clicking. My name is Jason. I'm 34 years old, and my own parents once sat across from me and demanded that I forgive my younger brother for having an affair with my wife and getting her pregnant. Then they insisted I pay to support them. Before I tell you about the moment in a courtroom that changed everything, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories can reach. The air in my parents' living room was thick enough to choke on. It was the same room where I'd opened Christmas presents, the same room where my brother Leo and I had built forts out of cushions. But that day it felt like a cage. My father, Richard, sat in his worn leather armchair, his face set like stone. My mother, Carol, was perched on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. And between them, like a prince holding court, sat my brother, Leo. Next to him, almost hiding behind his shoulder, was my wife, Chloe. Her hand rested on her visibly pregnant belly. The baby wasn't mine. No one spoke for a full minute. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, each tick a hammer blow against my sanity. I had been summoned here for a family meeting, a term that always meant I was about to be told what to do. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Jason," he began, his voice leaving no room for argument. "We're glad you came. This has been difficult for everyone." I just stared at him. Difficult for everyone? "Chloe and Leo have made a mistake," my mother said, her voice smooth and practiced, as if she'd rehearsed this. "A terrible mistake. But what's done is done. There's a child on the way. An innocent baby." I felt a cold laugh trying to claw its way up my throat, but I choked it down. "This baby is family," my father continued, leaning forward. "Leo, he's not in a position to provide for them right now. You know he's been struggling to find his footing." I knew Leo had been struggling his entire life, a struggle cushioned by our parents' money and endless excuses. "You, on the other hand," my father said, a flicker of something that might have been pride but felt more like calculation in his eyes. "You've done well. That MIT education, the big promotion at your tech firm, you're stable." And then came the line that shattered what was left of my world. "You're the big brother," he said, as if it were the simplest, most logical thing in the world. "It's your responsibility to step up, help them out, support them until Leo gets on his feet." My gaze drifted from my father's stern face, to my mother's pleading yet demanding stare, to Leo's infuriatingly smug expression, and finally to Chloe. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She just stared at her hands, cradling the life that had been built on the ruins of ours. They weren't just asking me to forgive. They were demanding I pay for the bullet they'd all fired into my heart. I sat there, silent, a storm raging inside of me. And in that silence, my mind went back. To understand the depth of their betrayal, to understand the ice that was forming in my veins in that suffocating room, you need to understand the last 34 years. You need to see what I saw. It started early. So early, I don't think I ever knew a time when it wasn't my reality. I was the firstborn, the responsible one. Leo was the surprise, the golden boy, 8 years my junior. From the moment he could walk, the entire family orbit shifted to revolve around him. My achievements were milestones. His were miracles. I remember it vividly. 6th grade. I'd spent months on my science fair project, a ridiculously complex model of a volcanic eruption, complete with baking soda and vinegar that actually worked. I was so proud. I'd stayed up late, glued my fingers together twice, and read every book on geology the school library had. I won first place. A big blue ribbon. The principal shook my hand. I ran home, clutching that ribbon like it was an Olympic medal. I burst through the door, yelling, "I won! I got first place!" My mom was in the kitchen. She glanced up from packing a cooler. "Oh, that's nice, honey," she said, her focus already elsewhere. "Can you grab the folding chairs from the garage? We're going to be late for Leo's t-ball practice." They didn't come to the awards ceremony that evening. Leo had a practice. Not a game. Practice. I stood on that stage, my name was called, and I looked out at the sea of smiling, proud parents, searching for two faces that weren't there. That night, I put the blue ribbon in a shoebox under my bed. It was the first time I learned that my best would never be good enough to compete with his average. Things only got worse as we got older. When I turned 16, the conversation about a car came up. My dad sat me down. "Look, Jason," he said, "a car is a big responsibility. If you want one, you need to earn it." So I did. I got a job bagging groceries at the local supermarket. I worked weekends, holidays, and every summer vacation. I saved every single penny, putting it into a savings account that I labeled College and Car Fund. It took me 2 years, but I finally bought a beat-up, 10-year-old Toyota. I loved that car more than anything. It was mine. I had earned it. The day Leo turned 16, I came home from my classes at the community college to find a brand new Mustang in the driveway with a giant red bow on it. Leo was tossing the keys in the air, a lazy grin on his face. "Sweet, right?" he'd said. "Dad said a guy's gotta have a good car in high school." I looked at my parents. My mother was beaming. "He was so surprised," she gushed. My father just clapped Leo on the back. I felt that old, familiar sting. It wasn't about the car. It was about the principle. My hard work was expected. His wants were gifted. The final straw of my childhood came on the day I got my acceptance letter from MIT. It was my dream. I'd applied on a long shot, never believing I'd actually get in. Not only did they accept me, but they offered me a partial scholarship. It wasn't a full ride, but it was a fighting chance. I still needed to cover a huge chunk of the tuition, but with my savings, student loans, and a willingness to work 3 jobs, I knew I could make it happen. I ran into the living room waving the letter. I got in. I got into MIT. My father looked up from the TV, where a baseball game was on. "MIT, huh? Good school. That'll be expensive." There was no hug. No, "I'm so proud of you." Just a pragmatic, almost dismissive statement about the cost. My mother was on the phone, but she covered the receiver. "That's wonderful, dear," she said, before turning back to her call. "Sorry, Linda, you were saying?" Later that evening, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. I was hoping, praying they were discussing how they could help me, maybe with a small loan for my books. Instead, I heard my dad say, "Did you hear what the coach told me? He thinks Leo could be the starting pitcher next season." A real arm on that kid. I stood in the hallway, the acceptance letter feeling like ash in my hand. They were planning my brother's high school sports career while I was figuring out how to fund an Ivy League education on my own. It was then that I truly understood. I wasn't their son in the same way Leo was. I was just the other one, the one who was expected to figure it out on his own. And so I did. Move-in day at MIT was a blur of cardboard boxes, nervous energy, and other kids with their proud families. Parents were hugging their sons and daughters, helping them make their beds, taking one last photo before saying goodbye. My parents weren't there. Leo had a big baseball game that day, the season opener, and they couldn't miss it. I told them it was fine. I was an adult, I could handle it. But as I lugged a heavy box of textbooks up 3 flights of stairs by myself, I couldn't ignore the ache in my chest. But that ache became my fuel. If they weren't going to invest in me, I would invest in myself. I threw myself into my studies. I worked 3 part-time jobs. One in the university library, one waiting tables at a diner on weekends, and one doing freelance coding late at night. Sleep became a luxury. My social life was non-existent. But every time I aced an exam, every time I solved a complex problem that had stumped my classmates, I felt a surge of validation that was more potent than any parental praise I had ever craved. My college fund was always tight, but my determination was limitless. I graduated with honors in computer science. I walked across that stage, shook the dean's hand, and for a fleeting moment, I scanned the crowd. They weren't there. They were on a cruise to the Bahamas, a graduation gift for Leo for finishing high school. The real world was kinder. My degree from MIT was a golden ticket. I had 5 job offers before I even had my diploma in hand. I could have gone anywhere, Silicon Valley, New York, Austin. But I chose a promising tech firm in Boston. Part of it was practical. It was a great offer. But a deeper, more naive part of me still believed that if I was physically close, if they could see my success firsthand, maybe things would change. I excelled at my job. I poured the same relentless energy that got me through college into my career. I climbed the ladder quickly. Within 5 years, I received a major promotion, becoming the youngest senior developer in the company's history. My salary was more than I had ever dreamed of. I bought a nice condo in Cambridge. I was independent, successful, and respected by my peers. But with my family, I was still invisible. When I told them about my promotion, my mom just said, "Oh, that's nice. Does that mean you get more vacation time?" They didn't understand what I did. To them, computer stuff was a vague, uninteresting concept. Their conversations were always dominated by Leo's latest drama. He had dropped out of college after changing his major 3 times. He'd tried to be a personal trainer, then a real estate agent, then a day trader. Each venture failed, and each time, our parents were there to bail him out, financially and emotionally. I tried to bridge the gap. I'd invite them out to fancy dinners, trying to share my world with them. They'd spend the entire meal talking about how Leo was finding himself. It was maddening. Here I was, a living, breathing example of success born from sheer grit, and all they could see was the romantic notion of their struggling golden boy. I started to pull back, not out of anger anymore, but out of self-preservation. I was tired of knocking on a door that would never open. I decided to focus on building a life and a family of my own. A family that would choose me. I thought I had found that with Chloe. I met Chloe on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was ducking into a small coffee shop near my office to escape a sudden downpour, and she was the barista behind the counter. She had a smile that could have parted the clouds and a laugh that was deep and genuine. I was instantly captivated. I ordered a black coffee and ended up staying for 2 hours, long after the rain had stopped. We talked about everything. I found myself telling her things I'd never told anyone, not even my closest friends. I told her about my family, about Leo, about the constant feeling of being second best. I expected the usual polite sympathy, the "oh, that's tough." But Chloe listened with an intensity that made me feel like I was the only person in the world. When I finished, she reached across the small table and put her hand on mine. "They're blind, Jason," she said, her voice soft but firm. "They have no idea what they missed out on." In that moment, I felt a crack in the wall I'd built around my heart for years. For the first time, I felt seen. Our first date lasted 6 hours. Our second was the entire weekend. Within a year, I knew she was the one. I proposed on a trip to Vermont during peak fall foliage. I was a nervous wreck, but she said yes with tears of joy streaming down her face. We had a small, perfect wedding. My family was there, of course. During the reception, I overheard my father telling one of my uncles, "It's a nice wedding. You know, Leo is thinking about getting his contractor's license. Big money in that." Even on my wedding day, I was the opening act for the Leo show. But for the first time, it didn't sting as much. I had Chloe now. She was my family. The first 3 years of our marriage were the happiest of my life. We bought that condo in Cambridge and turned it into a home. We traveled. We hosted dinner parties for our friends. Chloe was a teacher, patient and kind, and she created a world of warmth and acceptance for me that was the complete opposite of the one I grew up in. She encouraged me to try to mend fences with my parents, to not give up on them. She was my biggest champion. We started talking about kids. We were both excited about the idea. We'd paint the spare room, buy a crib, start our own family with our own traditions. I felt like my life was finally complete. I had the career, the home, and a loving wife who saw me for who I was. The wounds of my past were finally beginning to heal. And then, one evening, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Leo standing on my doorstep. He looked tired and defeated, a suitcase at his feet. He'd just come back from California, where his latest get-rich-quick scheme had, predictably, imploded. He looked at me, his eyes full of a humility I'd never seen before. "Can I stay for a few days, man?" he asked. "I've got nowhere else to go. I really messed up." Chloe came up behind me and put a hand on my arm. She gave me a look full of her characteristic compassion. "Of course you can stay, Leo," she said, smiling warmly. "Your family." And I, wanting to be the man she believed I was, agreed. I let him in. I let the snake into my Garden of Eden. At first, it was almost nice having Leo around. He seemed different, humbled by his failures in California. He praised my condo, asked questions about my job with what seemed like genuine interest, and even helped Chloe with dinner. He talked a big game about turning his life around, about finally growing up. He just needs a second chance. Chloe would tell me in bed at night, "Everyone deserves that. He's your brother, Jason." I wanted to believe her. I really did. A part of me, the part that had always yearned for a real brotherly connection, was hopeful. So I let my guard down. I gave him a key so he could come and go. I lent him money to get back on his feet. I even used my network to help him get a few job interviews. But slowly, subtly, things began to shift. The job interviews never panned out. According to Leo, they were always beneath him, or the culture wasn't a good fit. He spent his days at our condo on our couch watching our TV. When I'd get home from a 10-hour day at work, I'd often find him and Chloe laughing in the kitchen over a bottle of wine. "Just keeping your wife company," he'd say with a wink. It started with small things. Inside jokes I wasn't a part of. Them finishing each other's sentences. I'd walk into a room and they'd suddenly go quiet. When I asked about it, Chloe would just wave it off. "Oh, it was nothing. Just Leo being silly." I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. I told myself I was being paranoid, projecting my old insecurities about Leo onto my marriage. Chloe was my rock. She would never betray me. I was just being the difficult, jealous older brother my parents always accused me of being. But the red flags kept piling up. Leo started borrowing my things without asking: my clothes, my laptop. Once, I came home early and found him wearing my favorite watch. When I confronted him, he just laughed. "Relax, bro. I was just seeing how it felt to be a high roller like you." Chloe defended him. "Don't be so sensitive, Jason. He's just trying to feel good about himself." The worst was when I started feeling like a guest in my own home. I'd come home and they'd be in the middle of a movie I wanted to see, or they'd have already eaten the dinner I was looking forward to. They had their own rhythm, their own routine that had formed while I was at work, providing for all of us. One night, I had to work late on a major project launch. I called Chloe to let her know I wouldn't be home until after midnight. "Oh, okay," she said, her voice sounding a little distant. "Don't worry about us. Leo's going to grill some steaks. You work hard. We'll be fine." Something about the way she said "us" sent a chill down my spine. When I finally got home, exhausted, the house was dark except for the faint glow of the TV. The plates from their dinner were still on the coffee table. I walked down the hall to our bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. I could hear soft murmuring from inside. I pushed the door open, expecting to find Chloe asleep. Instead, my world stopped. Leo was in my room. He was sitting on the edge of my bed, talking to Chloe in a low voice. He wasn't doing anything wrong, not technically, but the intimacy of the scene. My brother in my bedroom with my wife late at night felt like a profound violation. They both looked up, startled. Leo had the decency to look guilty. Chloe, however, just looked annoyed. "Jason, you scared me," she said, her voice sharp. "What's the big deal?" I didn't have an answer then, but I knew, deep down, that something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. That night, I slept on the couch. I told myself it was because I didn't want to wake her. But the truth was, I couldn't bear to lie next to her. The next few weeks were a living hell of cold politeness and forced smiles. The air in the condo was thick with unspoken words. I was sleeping on the couch more often than not, burying myself in work to avoid being home. I felt like I was going crazy, seeing ghosts in every corner. Every time Chloe's phone buzzed, I felt a jolt of anxiety. The breaking point came on a Saturday. Chloe said she was going out to meet a friend from her old teaching college for lunch. Leo was supposedly out on a job hunt. I had the condo to myself for the first time in months, but I couldn't relax. That gnawing suspicion was eating me alive. I knew it was a violation of her privacy, something I never thought I would do, but I couldn't stop myself. Her laptop was on the coffee table. She always stayed logged into her social media. My hands were shaking as I opened it. I told myself I would just look for a minute, just enough to put my mind at ease. I went to her messages, and there it was, a conversation thread with Leo. Not just for the past few weeks, but for months. My blood ran cold as I scrolled up, reading messages that were sent while I was in the next room, while I was at work, while I was sleeping on the couch. They weren't just friendly. They were intimate, flirtatious, full of secrets and shared moments. Leo, can't wait to see you later. Winky face. Chloe, he's working late again tonight. The house is all ours. Leo, you looked beautiful this morning. Chloe, stop, you'll make me blush. He never says things like that anymore. And then I found it. A message from Chloe to Leo, sent about 6 weeks earlier. My breath hitched in my throat. Chloe, the test was positive. It's yours. I don't know what we're going to do. I felt the world tilt on its axis. The screen blurred as a wave of nausea washed over me. Positive. It's yours. 6 weeks ago. That was right around the time we had supposedly started trying for a baby. The conversations we had, the plans we made. It was all a lie. I wasn't just being cheated on. I was being used as a cover story. I must have blacked out for a moment, because the next thing I knew, I was hearing the key in the front door. Chloe walked in, a shopping bag in her hand, humming a cheerful tune. She stopped dead when she saw my face, when she saw the open laptop in front of me. The color drained from her cheeks. Jason, she whispered, her voice trembling. I couldn't form a sentence. All I could do was point at the screen. She looked, and her face crumpled. But it wasn't the face of someone who was sorry. It was the face of someone who had been caught. What is this? I finally managed to choke out, my voice raspy and unrecognizable. Chloe, what is this? She took a deep breath, and when she looked back at me, the fear was gone, replaced by a chilling sort of defiance. It's what it looks like, she said, her voice suddenly steady. You're pregnant? With his baby? The words felt like shards of glass in my mouth. She nodded, lifting her chin. Yes. The confession was so blunt, so devoid of remorse. It knocked the wind out of me. I waited for the apologies, the tears, the excuses. They never came. Instead, she said the words that would haunt me forever. I'm sorry it happened this way, Jason, but it did happen. We didn't plan it. Leo and I, we just connect. He sees me. He understands me in a way you never did. With you, it was always about work, about providing. With him, I feel alive. Alive. She felt alive while she was systematically destroying my life. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it was almost surreal. My wife and my brother. In my home. In my bed. Creating a life behind my back. In that moment, the love I had for her curdled into something cold and hard. The man who had entered that room died, and someone else, someone I didn't recognize, was born in his place. I don't remember packing a bag. I just remember the robotic motions of pulling clothes from my closet, shoving them into a duffel bag, my hands moving on their own while my mind was a white-hot static. Chloe and Leo were in the living room, whispering urgently. They didn't try to stop me. I drove aimlessly for an hour before ending up in a cheap hotel room on the outskirts of the city. The floral bedspread smelled like stale cigarettes. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress and did the only thing I could think of. The one thing a son is supposed to do when his world falls apart. I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring. Jason? Is everything all right? It's late. Mom! I croaked, my voice breaking. It's Chloe. And Leo. I could barely get the words out. They've been having an affair. She's pregnant, Mom. And it's his. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I expected to hear a gasp, an expression of shock, of maternal fury on my behalf. I waited for her to say, I'm so sorry, honey. I'm on my way. Instead, what I heard was a deep, weary sigh. "Oh, Jason," she said, and her tone was not one of sympathy, but of disappointment. Disappointment in me. "We know," she said quietly. "Leo told us a few weeks ago." The floor dropped out from under me. They knew. For weeks they had known. They had looked me in the eye, had dinner with me, asked about my work, all while knowing this catastrophic secret. "You knew," I whispered, the betrayal a fresh, searing wave of pain. "Listen to me," she said, her voice shifting from weary to firm. "Your brother made a mistake. He feels terrible about it. But he's trying to do the right thing now. He's going to be a father. And Chloe, well, Jason, you have to admit you've been distant lately. You're always at work. A woman needs attention." I was speechless. She was blaming me. My own mother was blaming me. "What I need you to do now," she continued, her voice all business, "is to be the bigger person. You need to handle this like an adult. This family cannot fall apart over this. You need to forgive them. Forgive them." I finally found my voice, and it was filled with a rage I didn't know I possessed. "He slept with my wife. She is pregnant with his child. In my home. And you want me to forgive them? Don't you raise your voice at me," she snapped. "Think about the baby. Think about the family's reputation. You are the stable one, Jason. You've always been the strong one. We need you to be strong now." That was it. That was the moment everything became clear. I wasn't their son. I was their utility, their fixer, the one who was supposed to absorb the damage caused by their precious, flawless golden boy. A cold, terrifying calm washed over me. I stood up, the phone still pressed to my ear. "No," I said, my voice flat and dead. "What did you say?" I said no. I'm done. I'm done being strong for all of you. I'm done cleaning up his messes. I took a deep breath. "Tell Dad I'm calling a lawyer tomorrow morning. I'm filing for divorce." Before she could respond, before she could unleash the guilt and manipulation I knew was coming, I hung up. I blocked her number, then my dad's, then Leo's. I sat in that silent, grimy hotel room and felt the last tether to my family snap. I was completely and utterly alone. And for the first time in my life, it felt like a relief. The war had just begun, but I had finally chosen a side, my own. The next morning, I found the best divorce lawyer in Boston. Her name was Mrs. Chun, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s with eyes that seemed to see right through you. I sat in her plush office, the city skyline behind her, and laid out the entire sordid story. I expected judgment or at least surprise. Instead, she just nodded calmly, taking notes. "This is messy," she said when I finished, her voice even. "But it's not unwinnable. They will try to make this your fault. Be prepared." She was right. The divorce proceedings began, and they immediately turned ugly. Chloe and Leo, with the full backing of my parents, launched a coordinated character assassination campaign. Their legal filings painted me as a monster. A controlling, emotionally abusive husband who was obsessed with work and money. They claimed my neglect had driven Chloe into Leo's arms. It was a complete fabrication, a twisted narrative designed to make her the victim and justify her claim to a significant portion of my assets, including spousal support. The most painful part was my parents' involvement. They submitted sworn affidavits supporting Chloe's claims. They wrote about how I was always difficult, jealous of Leo's carefree spirit, and materialistic. They twisted my hard work into a character flaw, my ambition into greed. Reading their words, legally filed with the court, felt like being stabbed by 1,000 tiny knives. I was reeling, but Mrs. Chun was my anchor. "This is standard tactics for this type of case, Jason," she told me, her voice a steady presence in the chaos. "They are trying to provoke you, to make you angry and irrational. We will not play their game. We will play ours." Her strategy was simple: meticulous documentation. "From this moment on," she instructed, "you will save every email, every text message. Record every phone call if it's legal in your state. Keep a journal of every interaction. They have given us a narrative of lies. We will defeat it with a mountain of truth." She was preparing for a war I hadn't even known was coming. She had me install a security camera in my car, another one on my new apartment door. She told me to inform my workplace's HR department about the situation, just in case. I felt like I was in a spy movie, but I did everything she said. I trusted her. She was the first person in months who was unequivocally on my side. Meanwhile, the harassment from my family was escalating. With their numbers blocked, they started emailing me. My mother sent long, rambling messages about forgiveness and family duty. My father sent short, blunt ones demanding I stop this nonsense and take care of your responsibilities. Leo had the audacity to send me an ultrasound picture. "Meet your nephew," the subject line read. I deleted it without opening. They were trying to break me down, to wear me out until I gave in. But with every lie they told, with every manipulative email they sent, something inside me hardened. The grief was still there, but it was being forged into something else. Resolve. They thought I was the same quiet, accommodating Jason who would do anything for a scrap of their approval. They had no idea who they were dealing with anymore. They were about to find out. A few weeks into the legal battle, my family realized their emails and voicemails weren't getting through to me. Their frustration boiled over, and my mother decided to take a more direct approach. I was in the middle of a high-stakes meeting with my team and our CEO, Mr. Harrison, finalizing a major project launch. We were deep in discussion when my assistant buzzed me on the intercom, her voice strained. "Jason, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but your mother is here, in the lobby. She's causing a bit of a scene." A cold dread washed over me. I excused myself, my face burning with embarrassment, and walked towards the front of our gleaming, professional office building. I could hear her before I could see her. Her voice, shrill and indignant, echoed through the marble lobby. She was standing in front of the reception desk, yelling at the poor young woman behind it. Several of my colleagues were standing around, trying not to stare. "I am his mother. I have a right to see him. He can't just ignore his family." When she saw me, her anger focused like a laser beam. "There you are," she shrieked, pointing a finger at me. "How dare you? How dare you treat us like this after everything we've done for you?" I kept my voice low and steady, just as Mrs. Chun had advised. "Mom, this is my workplace. This is not the time or the place." "Oh, your precious workplace," she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "The only thing you've ever cared about. Your brother is struggling. He's about to be a father. And you're in here playing with your computers, pretending we don't exist." By now, our head of security, a calm, imposing man named Frank, had arrived. Mr. Harrison had also followed me out and was watching from a distance, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am," Frank said politely but firmly, "I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice." "Don't you talk to me," she snapped at him. "My son is abandoning his family. He's trying to leave his brother and his pregnant sister-in-law with nothing." The lie hung in the air, thick and poisonous. It was a calculated performance for the audience of my coworkers. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, filled with confusion and judgment. The humiliation was immense. But I remembered Mrs. Chen's words, "Do not engage. Do not react." I looked at Frank and gave him a slight nod. "Frank, please escort my mother out of the building." My mother's face contorted with fury. As Frank gently but firmly guided her towards the exit, she yelled one last thing over her shoulder. "You'll regret this, Jason. Family is forever." I stood there for a moment in the dead silence of the lobby, the ghost of her words hanging in the air. I could feel the pitying stares of my colleagues. I turned and walked back towards the conference room, my head held high, but my insides were churning. Later that day, Frank brought me a copy of the incident report and a link to the security footage. "Just in case you need it," he said with a sympathetic look. I forwarded it all to Mrs. Chun with a simple message, "More evidence." Her reply was immediate. "This is not evidence, Jason. This is a gift." And I was beginning to understand that every desperate, crazy thing they did was just another nail in their own coffin. The initial divorce settlement was contentious, but it was nothing compared to what came next. A few months after it was finalized, I was served with new legal papers. Leo and Chloe were suing me. They were demanding a massive increase in spousal and child support, even though the child wasn't mine, claiming a change in circumstances. Their petition was a work of fiction. They alleged that I had used my influence in the Boston tech community to blacklist Leo, making it impossible for him to find a job. They claimed Chloe was suffering from a high-risk pregnancy due to the emotional distress I had caused, requiring expensive medical care. It was a blatant cash grab, built on a foundation of audacious lies. "This is good," Mrs. Chun said, a thin smile on her lips as she read the documents. "They're overplaying their hand. They're greedy. We can use that." The court date arrived. I walked into the courtroom feeling a strange sense of calm. My parents were there, sitting right behind Leo and Chloe, forming a united front of delusional solidarity. They all shot daggers at me. Leo looked cocky, Chloe looked like a suffering victim, and my parents looked self-righteous. They genuinely believed they were in the right. Their lawyer, a slick man named Gable, was confident and theatrical. He spent the first hour painting me as a vindictive millionaire, a tech mogul who was using his power and wealth to crush his humble, struggling family. He talked about my high salary, my stock options, my lavish condo. He presented Leo as a talented young man whose career prospects had been mysteriously sabotaged. "Mr. Smith," Gable said, gesturing dramatically towards me, "is a man who has forgotten where he came from, a man who would rather hoard his fortune than help his own flesh and blood in their time of need. He is punishing this poor, pregnant woman and his own brother for a simple human mistake." He called my mother to the stand. She cried crocodile tears, talking about how I'd always been so competitive with Leo and how this was just my ultimate act of jealousy. She described the scene at my office as the desperate act of a heartbroken mother, just trying to reach her cold, distant son. My father followed, his testimony gruff and accusatory, confirming the narrative of me as the ungrateful, vengeful son. Through it all, Mrs. Chun and I sat quietly. We didn't object much. We let them talk. We let them build their tower of lies, brick by brick. I could see the judge, a stern-looking woman in her late 50s, listening intently. A few times, I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes as she looked at me, and my stomach clenched. It was working. They were convincing her. Finally, Gable rested his case. He looked at us with a triumphant smirk. The judge turned to my lawyer. "Mrs. Chun, your response." Mrs. Chun stood up slowly, her movements deliberate. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod in my direction. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear and steady, "we would like to present some evidence to clarify the picture that has been painted here today. The trap had been set. The bait had been taken. Now it was time to spring it." I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. It was all or nothing. "First," Mrs. Chun began, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom, "let's address the claim that my client has sabotaged Mr. Leo Smith's career prospects." She placed a thick binder on the witness stand. "This file contains printouts of Mr. Leo Smith's email and social media accounts, obtained via subpoena. In it, we have documented no fewer than 6 job offers he has received in the last 4 months. All from reputable companies. All with competitive salaries." She projected an email onto the large screen in the courtroom. It was from Leo to a friend. The text was damning. "Just got another offer, lol. $50K a year to be a project assistant." As if, why would I bust my ass for that when my brother's loaded? "This lawsuit is going to be my new salary." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Leo's face went white. Mr. Gable jumped to his feet. "Objection. Relevance. It's highly relevant, counsel," the judge said, her eyes narrowed at Leo. "Please continue, Mrs. Chun." "Next," Mrs. Chun said, moving on without missing a beat, "the claim of a high-risk pregnancy." She produced another set of documents. "These are Ms. Chloe Smith's medical records, also obtained via subpoena. They show a perfectly healthy pregnancy. In fact, Her obstetrician has described it as remarkably smooth. There are no indications of any special medical needs or the extreme distress claimed in their petition. Chloe sank lower in her chair, avoiding my gaze. My mother and father were now whispering furiously to each other. The confidence was gone, replaced by a creeping panic. And finally, Mrs. Chun said, her voice dropping slightly, becoming more serious, let's talk about the alleged harassment. The petitioner claims my client is the aggressor. We would argue the opposite. She played the security footage from my office lobby. The entire courtroom watched in stunned silence as my mother, Carol Smith, shrieked and yelled, accusing me of abandoning my family. They saw her being calmly and professionally escorted out by security. The audio was crystal clear. This is the act of a concerned mother? Mrs. Chun asked the silent room. Or is it part of a coordinated campaign of intimidation and public humiliation? She wasn't done. She submitted the phone records, the dozens of emails, the log from my building security showing my father showing up unannounced and refusing to leave. She built the mountain of truth, piece by irrefutable piece. The final blow was a deposition from my former CEO, Mr. Harrison. In it, he stated that he had never received any communication from me regarding Leo, and that my conduct during my mother's disturbing and unprofessional outburst was exemplary. When she was finished, a heavy silence fell over the courtroom. Mr. Gable had nothing to say. My family looked like they had been struck by lightning. They were exposed, their lies stripped bare for a judge and a room full of strangers to see. The judge took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. She looked at Leo and Chloe, then at my parents, and her expression was one of utter contempt. Then she looked at me, and for the first time I saw a glimmer of understanding, maybe even sympathy. She cleared her throat. After reviewing the evidence presented, she began, her voice like steel. This court finds the petition for increased support to be not only baseless but frankly fraudulent. She wasn't finished. Furthermore, it is clear to this court that Mr. Jason Smith has been the target of a malicious and calculated campaign of harassment and attempted financial exploitation by his brother, his ex-wife, and his parents. She looked directly at my family. I find your behavior to be reprehensible. Then she delivered the final, beautiful verdict. The petition is dismissed, and based on the evidence of bad faith, I am reversing a portion of the original divorce settlement. The spousal support granted to Ms. Smith will be reduced by 60%, effective immediately. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a deafening crack. It was over. I had won. A wave of relief so powerful it almost brought me to my knees washed over me. I looked over at my family. Their faces were masks of pure shock and disbelief. They hadn't just lost a lawsuit. They had lost their power over me, forever. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for sticking with me to this point. You are amazing. If you could, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you made it here with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The walk out of the courthouse was surreal. My family was huddled together, their lawyer trying to speak to them, but they weren't listening. They were staring at me, their expressions a toxic cocktail of hatred and disbelief. For the first time, I didn't feel a thing. No anger, no sadness, not even satisfaction. Just nothing. The emotional hold they'd had on me for 34 years had been incinerated in that courtroom. I walked right past them without a word and got into a cab. On the ride back to my apartment, Mrs. Chun called. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice professional but with an undercurrent of warmth. "Empty," I said honestly, "but in a good way." "You did well, Jason. You held your nerve," she said. "I've already filed the paperwork for the reduced payments. They won't be able to appeal. The judge's ruling was ironclad." She paused. "I also ran a preliminary check on your parents' finances to see if we needed to file a restraining order. It seems they took out a second mortgage on their house to pay for Mr. Gable's legal fees." The news landed without impact. It wasn't my problem anymore. Actions have consequences. They had gambled everything on the belief that I would fold, that I was still the same person they had always known. They had made a bad bet. A few days later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that the fallout had been catastrophic. Leo and Chloe were fighting constantly, blaming each other for the failed lawsuit. The reduced support meant they couldn't afford their apartment anymore. My parents were in a financial hole they would likely never climb out of. The perfect family facade had shattered, revealing the ugly, dysfunctional reality beneath. My father called me a week after the verdict. I had unblocked their numbers, not because I wanted to talk, but because I wanted to be the one to hang up. His voice was different. The usual blustering authority was gone, replaced by a tired, hesitant rasp. "Jason," he said, we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice even. "Your mother, she's not doing well. This has been very hard on her. The consequences of her own actions," I replied, the words coming easily, free from the guilt that would have once choked me. "She made a public spectacle. She lied under oath. What did she expect? She's still your mother," he pleaded, a pathetic attempt to pull at heartstrings that had already been severed. "And Leo is still your son," I shot back. "And he's your problem now. You made your choice. All of you. Now you get to live with it." There was a long silence. I could hear his strained breathing. He was waiting for me to give in, to offer a solution, to fix it like I was always supposed to. I didn't give him the satisfaction. "Goodbye, Dad," I said, and I disconnected the call. I felt a profound sense of closure. The power dynamic had shifted forever. They could no longer command, only beg. And I was no longer listening. A month went by in blessed silence. Then my mother called. Her voice was unrecognizable, small, fragile, and stripped of all its former manipulative power. She asked if I would meet them, just for coffee. She said they needed to apologize. A part of me wanted to say no, to never see their faces again. But another part knew I needed this one final interaction to close the book for good. I agreed, but on my terms. Public place. A busy coffee shop downtown during the lunch rush. There would be no dramatic scenes, no raised voices. I saw them before they saw me. They were sitting at a small table, looking older and more worn out than I had ever seen them. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out weariness. I sat down, and they both flinched, as if they expected me to yell. "I just ordered a coffee. Jason, thank you for coming," my mother began, her hands trembling around her mug. We are so sorry." "Sorry for what, specifically?" I asked, my tone neutral. I wasn't going to make this easy for them. They needed to say the words. My father sighed, a sound heavy with defeat. "We were wrong. We were wrong to defend Leo. We were wrong to pressure you. We were wrong to lie in court." It was the closest thing to a real admission of guilt I had ever heard from them. "We were just so worried about Leo," my mother added, a hint of the old excuse making creeping back in. "And the baby. We just wanted to protect the family." "You didn't protect the family," I said calmly, looking her straight in the eye. "You destroyed it. You chose one son over the other. You chose a lie over the truth. There's no coming back from that." Tears welled up in her eyes. "What can we do to fix this?" she whispered. I took a sip of my coffee. I had thought about this moment, about what I would say if it ever came. And the answer was surprisingly simple. "Nothing," I said. "You can't fix it. What you can do is leave me alone. Let me live my life, and you live yours." I stood up from the table, putting a $10 bill down for my coffee. "I forgive you," I said, and they both looked up, a flicker of desperate hope in their eyes. I quickly extinguished it. "I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to be at peace. I'm letting go of all of it. The anger, the hurt, all of it. And I'm letting go of you." I turned and walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. The sun was bright outside. For the first time, I felt truly free. The chains of guilt and obligation that had bound me my entire life had finally rusted through and fallen away. I was on my own, and the future was a blank page. The decision to leave Boston came easily. The city was full of ghosts. Every street corner held a memory, and I was ready for a fresh start. Mr. Harrison, my CEO, had been incredibly supportive after the public fiasco with my mother. When I told him I was thinking of relocating, he not only understood but made a call. His company had a larger office in Seattle, and a senior management position had just opened up. He gave me a glowing recommendation. 2 weeks later, I was packing up my apartment. My last day at the Boston office was surprisingly emotional. My team, led by my good friend and colleague David, threw me a farewell party. They knew the vague details of my family problems, but they didn't need to know everything to show their support. They gave me a beautiful card signed by everyone in the department. One message, written in big letters by David, stood out. Your value isn't determined by those who can't see it. Go be brilliant. I almost lost it right there. These people, my work family, had shown me more loyalty and respect than my own blood ever had. Moving to Seattle was like taking my first deep breath after nearly drowning. The city was vibrant, surrounded by water and mountains, a world away from the stifling history of Boston. My new job was challenging and rewarding. I was leading a talented team on an innovative new project. I was respected for my skills and my leadership, not for who my brother was. I made a conscious effort to build a new life. I joined a hiking club and spent my weekends exploring the stunning trails of the Pacific Northwest. I reconnected with an old friend from MIT, Maria, who also lived in the city. We'd grab dinner once a week, and it was refreshing to talk to someone who knew the before Jason, but wasn't tied to the family drama. I was healing. The anger had faded, replaced by a quiet, peaceful indifference. The constant weight on my shoulders was gone. I was sleeping through the night for the first time in over a year. I was discovering who Jason was when he wasn't Richard and Carol's son, or Leo's older brother. I was just Jason, and I was starting to really like that guy. One evening, I was sitting on the balcony of my new apartment, looking out at the glittering lights of the city and the dark silhouette of the mountains beyond. My phone buzzed with a text from David. It was a photo of him and the old team out for drinks. The caption read, "Boston misses you, boss." I smiled. I realized I had finally found what I had been searching for my whole life. A family, not one defined by blood or obligation, but one forged in mutual respect, loyalty, and genuine care. A chosen family. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared entirely, but it no longer defined me. It was just a scar, a reminder of a battle I had fought and won. I was the architect of my own life now, and the view from Seattle was looking pretty good. Just when I thought I had truly left the past behind, it sent one final echo across the country. It was a Tuesday evening, about 6 months after I'd moved to Seattle. An unknown number from a Boston area code flashed on my screen. Against my better judgment, I answered, "Jason, it's your Aunt Susan." My Aunt Susan, my father's sister. She was the family's designated peacemaker, a woman who specialized in smoothing over conflict with syrupy sweet platitudes while subtly twisting the knife of guilt. "Hello, Susan," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Oh, it's so good to hear your voice, honey," she cooed. "We've all been so worried about you, all alone out there." I didn't bite. "I'm not alone, and I'm doing just fine. What can I do for you?" Her tone shifted, becoming more somber. "Jason, I'm calling about your father. His health, it's not good. The stress of all this. The house. Here it comes," I thought. The guilt trip. "They're going to lose the house, Jason," she said, her voice cracking with practiced emotion. "The second mortgage, the legal fees. They're drowning. Your mother is a wreck. They've lost everything." I remained silent, letting her play her hand. "And I know your marriage didn't work out," she continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "And I know Chloe made a mistake. But, Jason, it takes two to tango. Maybe if you had been a bit more present in your marriage, a bit less focused on your career, none of this would have happened." And there it was, the final, desperate attempt to shift the blame back onto me. A year ago, that comment would have gutted me. it would have tapped right into my deepest insecurities. But now it was just pathetic. The last gasp of a dying narrative. I let her finish, and then I asked a very simple, very calm question. "Susan," I said, my voice so quiet she had to strain to hear, "how is Uncle Robert doing?" "Robert? He's fine, why?" she asked, confused by the change of subject. "His law firm is still one of the most successful in the state, isn't it?" I continued. "Well, yes, but what does that have to do with anything? And those 3 rental properties you own down on the Cape," I went on, my voice still level, "they must bring in a good income, especially in the summer." A tense silence filled the line. She knew where this was going. "You're calling me," I said, spelling it out for her, "from your comfortable home, using a phone paid for by your husband's successful law firm, to ask me to bail out the parents you claim to be so worried about. You're telling me about my responsibilities, about family. So let me ask you, Aunt Susan, you are their sister. You are wealthy. Why haven't you helped them?" She was utterly speechless. I had taken her manipulative script and torn it to shreds with simple, undeniable logic. Her hypocrisy was laid bare, and she had no defense. That's different," she finally stammered. "No," I said, my voice firm now, all traces of neutrality gone, replaced with the steel of finality. "It's not different. You want someone else to carry the burden just like they always have. Well, I'm resigning from that position. Permanently. Do not call me again." I hung up the phone before she could utter another word. I blocked her number. That, I knew, was the true end. Not the courtroom verdict, not the awkward coffee shop meeting, but this. The moment I calmly and completely dismantled the last weapon they had against me. Guilt. The echo had faded. There was only silence now, and it was beautiful. Tonight, I'm sitting on that same balcony, a cup of coffee in my hands, watching the ferries glide across the Puget Sound. It's been almost a year since that last phone call from my aunt. There have been no more attempts at contact. The silence has held. For a long time, I wrestled with the word family. It was a word that had brought me so much pain, a concept that felt like a cage of obligation and unwritten rules I could never seem to follow correctly. My whole life, I thought family was this thing you were born into, an unbreakable bond of blood that you had to endure, no matter how toxic it became. I thought it was about sacrifice, my sacrifice specifically, for the good of the whole. I was wrong. What I've learned, out here on my own, is that family isn't about blood. It's about respect. It's about trust. It's about showing up for each other, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. It's about celebrating each other's victories, not being jealous of them. It's about holding each other accountable for mistakes, not making excuses for them. My family now is David, who still texts me pictures of my old office plant, which he's been watering for me. It's Maria, who dragged me out on a grueling 10-mile hike last weekend and shared her last granola bar with me at the summit. It's my team here in Seattle who rely on me and who I rely on in return. It's a family I chose, and one that chooses me back every day. I don't know what happened to Leo and Chloe, or the baby. I don't know if my parents lost their house. And the truth is, I don't want to know. Their story is no longer my story. I've turned the page and started a new chapter. The scars are still there. They probably always will be. But they don't hurt anymore. They're just a part of my map, a reminder of the terrain I've covered to get here. To this quiet moment of peace, in a city I now call home. My journey was about escaping a family that tried to break me, but it ended with me finding out what the word truly means. It's not about who you share your past with. It's about who you want to share your future with. And for the first time, my future looks bright. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it has touched you in some way. Have you ever had to face a similar situation where you had to choose between your family and your own well-being? I'd be honored if you shared your thoughts in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Your support truly means the world.